Welcome to Vinexposium podcast on Wines of the Future. Where are we coming from? Where are we now? And where are we heading? My name is Gabrielle Vizzavona, and with top international experts, we'll be discussing the past, present, and future of the wine industry fast forwarding 50 years. We are very happy to welcome Gabriel Lepousez for our Vinexpo Wines of the Future talk about the evolution of taste. Hello, Gabriel.
Hello everyone.
How are you?
Very good.
Gabriel, you are a French neuroscientist and an international expert on sensory perception and brain plasticity. You received your doctorate in neuroscience from the Paris Sorbonne University and hold a research position at the famous Institut Pasteur of Paris in the Laboratory for Perception and Memory. For more than 15 years, you have been exploring the function of brain circuits involved in sensory perception, memory, and emotions, uncovering the key role of neuronal plasticity in olfactory learning and perception. As a wine geek, we can say that of you, I believe, you also offer your scientific expertise to the world of wine education, sharing knowledge of the brain, this essential tool for wine tasting. In 2016, you co-founded L'Ecole du Nez, the School of Nose, a neuro-sensory training for wine professionals to understand how the brain works during wine tasting and how to improve our sensory performance. So, Gabriel, what are the keys to improve our sensory performance? This would be interesting to understand for us all, I believe.
To unravel all the mysteries of the brain, I think it's the key question I alluded by this point of the brain being our working tool for wine tasting is to convince yourself that when you tasting a glass of wine or having a meal is really a multisensory experience that the brain have to deal with. Multisensory meaning that the information arriving in your brain is through the eyes, through your nose, through your mouth, through your tactile perception, etc. So for the brain, tasting looks simple, but it's very complex. And so how to boost your performance? One way is to understand what are your senses? Which are they? How can we identify them? Can we put some names to really be sure that I'm discriminating different subsensory modalities? But also understanding how the brain make a big synthesis of this. And when the brain make a big synthesis of the taste of the wine, the brain gonna integrate and create a hierarchy of the senses. And so at the end, there is only one memory for one wine, but this memory is built over multiple layers of sensory information. So that's where we try to bring people, is to understand the strengths and the weaknesses also of the brain processing aspects. And also to understand that your brain can read the wine and read the messages of the wine through different perspectives. And that's the way you enrich both your vocabulary, your language, your perception, your ability to discriminate between different modalities. And that's the way you can empower all the messages of the wine.
How does the functioning of the brain impact our wine preferences?
Well, that's really kind of the big questions in the field right now. We know that, of course, genetic in general will shape the way we detect information from the environment. And that's definitely the case also for wine tasting. We have receptors in the nose, in the oral cavity, which exist in different versions in the human population. And so according to the versions you have in your genome, you may not detect the same stuff, the same sensory elements in the wine. So we are all, usually I used to take this metaphor, we are all a bit colorblind, if you want. We are not able to see this, but maybe we are able to see this. And so genetic is one aspect. The second aspect that is really strong in human is culture. Our culture, what I mean by culture is your experience, all your wine experience, but also your cultural experience through your families, through the society, which have definitely shaped the way you put words on some sensory elements, but also have built also your preferences, whether or not you like or dislike this point.
So this has an impact on the brain as well.
Exactly, and all this is then written on your brain. So why do you like bitter taste, for example, and why do other people don't like it? This is definitely driven a bit by genetic. We are all hardwired to avoid bitter taste by default, like any old mammals. But on the other hand, our culture, our preferences for bitter have changed a little bit according to our exposition, whether or not we have been exposed through a long time to different elements, whether we have tried to learn what are the positive aspects in addition to the negative reflex of avoiding bitterness. And all this, you can see, can make a French or an Italian appreciate bitterness a bit differently.
Definitely.
So that's one important aspect. If I take bitter as another example, we know now that bitterness is a sense that evolves with age. A young person or an old person won't taste bitterness the same way because of physiological changes, notably in the composition of the saliva. So which means that what I like today will probably not what I will like as a wine in 50 years, for example.
So will the young person prefer it, or?
Usually, you have noticed this with kids. Kids, they avoid, they have a sensory detection level that is lower, meaning that they can detect bitterness at much lower concentration. So they usually avoid more, plus they detect, the threshold is lower, so they detect very subtle level of bitterness, where us, we almost don't see it anymore. So that's a mechanism for kids to avoid potentially toxic elements.
We often talk about the brain as three different parts: the reptilian brain, the middle brain, the analytic brain. Which one would really explain our choices for wine?
Well, I would say the three, of course. And if you are building your decision only on your emotional aspect of the wine, whether you like it or dislike it, you may at some point know which one you like, but as soon as you have to describe it, you are not able to mention the good words to describe which one you like. And this is something we see sometimes in shops, in wine shops. People enter the shop, they start to say, I would like this kind of wine. And the merchant say, what kind of wine do you like? And people are not able to verbalize their perceptions. On the other end of the scale, you have experts that are super good to analyze the wine, to know which elements, what is the composition, what are the wine components of the wine. But those, like enologists, for example, the enologists, they are super good for give you an analytical picture of the wine. But sometimes they forgot about whether this picture is, in a sense, good or bad for the consumer. And you see, you have two different forms of rivalry, if you want, in your brain. You can process wine information from the emotional state of view or from the analytical point of view. And a good taster is a person that is able to gather those two facets, those two pathways, both the analytical and the emotional pathway, into a single and global representation.
What are the most unexpected changes you acknowledged in the consumer's taste since you started your career?
People start to drink more and more ideas. They drink the wine, but they like also to drink ideas. What I mean by drinking ideas is that they start to need to have some sort of comfort for their brain to drink the wine. So they like to know before drinking what the label is telling you, what the terroir is telling you, what the brand is telling you.
As a validation of the self, you would say?
They need this form of comfort to be sure that the brain will confirm what they've seen on the label. And an example of this is look at natural wine. Natural wine can really be divergent for two forms of population of tasters. Some people would say, oh, this natural wine is disgusting because there is a major wine fault. And they would say, I will never buy this wine. And other person would say, oh, but this wine has a little wine fault, but because it's natural, because it's without sulfite and without pesticides, etc., this is good for my body. And so they will fight against those two people because they don't tolerate the same ideas. At the end, the wine is the same, but one guy will say, I like it, and another one will say, this one is disgusting. And I see this more and more. I see more and more people that start to diverge in the way they appreciate the wine, and people which, for example, buy a lot of natural wine, now they try to avoid, let's say, conventional wine. And vice versa, people that still buy conventional wine, they try really to avoid natural wine. So what I foresee in the future is more and more people that eventually won't drink with each other, won't share the same wine because they will drink, I would say, in a form of isolation with their own community. And we will see a different community evolving and drifting without interacting, which is, for me, a kind of a bad news because it means that wine which which is there to gather a lot of people and discuss and argue about whether what is good, what is bad, at some point people will diverge. And potentially, I think the pandemic have also engraved this tendency a bit more. People start to gather together. There is a form really of communitarism, if you want, for wine drinkers. So I hope that won't be too much the case, but it's already there. It's already there.
What about the tastes? We have witnessed a diminution for the taste for sugar, for example, or for oaky flavors in most of the traditional wine consuming countries. Can we expect these flavors to become popular again in the future?
Well, we can try already to try to speculate on why we avoid those sensory aspects in nowadays. I think what I see, it's my personal interpretation, but what I see is that people avoid sugar and oaky flavor because they want to avoid these sensory elements that look like a makeup for the wine. They want to go directly into the wine. They want more transparency, and they want to be convinced that the wine is transparent and transmits some true, genuine messages. So sugar or oak, those different aspects, people consider that they are a barrier to really connect with the wine. So that's why we see less and less popular high dosage, for example, champagne, for example, and more extra brut. We see that the appetite for sweet wine is decreasing a lot and a lot. So I think somewhere right now, nowadays, people want more transparency. But what we see today will probably, as any tendency in human in general, whether it is in economics or in taste, there is always some extremes. And maybe today we are in a period in which we are going too extreme in the acidity, too extreme at some point, and we're going to have some bad experience of this look for extreme acidity. Because if you start to harvest grapes that are too acid, at some point the acidity will have some problem in terms of your appreciation of the digestibility. And this is something you can only observe in the comments of in the wine critics. People have started to avoid sugar, so less mature wine, for example. But what I've observed in the literature is the word digestibility, drinkability, gaining a lot of interest, appearing a lot in the statistics. So I think it's the premise of something that is happening is that if the wine are not digest anymore because they are too acidic, because they are unripe, both with the tannin or with the acidity, people at some point will say, oh, these wines we cannot drink these wines anymore. So we will need to come back to more mature wine with more sweetness. And I expect that this back and forth between the two extremes, a lot of mature wine versus a lot of one that is, let's say, unripe, but it's maybe too negative in this vocabulary, will oscillate between the two. Taste in general has been like that over the last decades.
From a neuroscientific point of view, how would it be justified?
Well, it's fun because right now my work is focusing a lot on how the brain not only process external information from the environment, odors, flavors, visual items, but also how the brain process internal information coming from the body, what we call interoception. And interoception refers to the ability of your brain to be able to detect what is happening in your gut, in your digestive tract, in your stomach, in your pharynx. And this is, in fact, not a conscious perception, but an unconscious perception that built up in your brain and reads through your emotional state, through your internal state. So what I'm referring to that is that the more we listen to the internal cavity of our body, the more we listen to our digestive tract, the more we feel that maybe a wine can be elegant from the flavor point of view, can be interesting from texture point of view, but at some point you may say, from the digestibility point of view, something is getting wrong and I won't finish my glass. And this is referring for us to the ability of the brain to also integrate into the representation of taste what is happening inside our body. And all this concept of digestibility have not been that much tackled yet from the perception point of view, but also from the consumer point of view. And I really foresee that at some point we may have to measure from the analytical point of view that some elements of the wine are maybe too extreme, not compatible with our digestive tract. And this, like alcohol, for example, this is well described on a bottle. At some point, we may also need to quantify a bit more to what extent this wine is potentially aggressive also for us.
As we understand better and better the way the brain works, could we imagine that in the future we could profile and make the perfect wine, the ideal wine?
In a sense, it looks like the Graal situation, because we potentially, in 50 years, we would be able to sequence our genome pretty rapidly and pretty efficiently and in a very cheap manner. So potentially, knowing your genotype and knowing your genes, I may be able to say, oh, this person maybe has a profile that matches this style of wine, with this type of flavor, with this type of acidic level, with this type of bitterness. And so I could try to match exactly a wine to your palate. But in a sense, I think this experience is not compatible with the idea of the wine, because wine is there to be shared. So if you offer me a wine that's been designed for your genome, if I test it with you, because we share wine, I won't perceive it at all like you, and we may not agree at all. And so this is where I think wine personalization to consumers don't need to go up to an extreme, which is the pure, unique personalization. On the other hand, as we mentioned before, we have to better know ourselves and better know the group of people we are tasting with, because this is the way we're going to emphasize the exchange and the way we want to share the wine, and our ability also to describe and share some ideas and some new products. So this is where we may have a divergence also in the way we interact with wine.
Could we use new tasting modalities in the future using the brain?
We already see a lot of improvement nowadays in the brain-machine interface. You know, those machines that are able to record your brain activity and be able to independently and remotely move an arm, for example, for prosthetics, for example. So in the future, what I see is that we may be able to record brain activity during wine tasting and formulate a form of immersive tasting through VR, for example, or through environments that would be totally virtual, in which the wine tasting would be enlarged, enhanced, if you want, in terms of interaction with the environment, in terms of sensory interactions. And so maybe there is some new way of tasting. We have been tasting a lot with people, for example. We have been tasting with closing our eyes, for example. I think the future may be exactly trying to do the opposite, trying to have an immersive environment to better feel the wine and to maybe drink the same wine in different environments to see the different personality of one given wine. And that's also where we see the strengths and the weaknesses of the brain. The brain has a tendency to confirm his first ideas, to confirm his first experience. So if you see a label, your brain will try to confirm what was seen on the label, the level of alcohol, for example. Well, in the future, maybe we can use brain-machine interface to avoid this shortcut and try to propose different environment, different virtual environment, to taste the same wine in different contexts, and at the end, see the different personality of the wine. And this is, I think, really something that will bring the wine to a level of experience that we are not there yet, but that is very exciting.
A multisensory experience, basically.
A purely multisensory experience where not only you experience sensory exchange with the wine, but also with the surrounding environment that is around. And I think this is where we can emphasize some facet of the wine. You can show in a very pedagogic manner some elements of the wine, which are in signature of the soil, of the winemaker, or the vintage. And using immersive reality and virtual reality, we may potentially highlight those facets that we are not well used to do when you are a young consumer, for example. You don't have in memory all the different aspects of the wine. Through the virtual reality, we potentially be able to engage more discussion with the wine and with the person. So it's maybe one aspect of the future.
Thank you so much, Gabrielle, for your time. Hopefully speak to you soon.
Thank you, Gabrielle. Thank you very much.
Thank you for tuning into Wines of the Future. Don't miss the next episode and subscribe to this podcast. You can also leave us a comment and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Vinexposium.